Yeah, hey there. These comments are for Rafaat. This is Michael, the founder, owner, and the materials writer for the 7-step system to pass the TOEFL IBT. And you just completed the integrated writing practice test number 1. You're one of my students. And you've also paid for the additional service to have me video correct your essay. Now, I want to do this on 2 levels, and hopefully it'll be not too confusing. So first of all, I want to go through your essay and make any necessary grammar corrections. I'll even explain why I'm making the corrections I am. And then the second time I go through the essay, I'll make some corrections in terms of organization and content. Alrighty? Let me put the light down here a little bit more so you can see me. Is that better? Okay, let's take a look at each line. So in this set of materials, the reading passage gives mainly an overview I'm going to put in the article the differences between, and be careful here, this is a punctuation problem. You don't want to separate your preposition from its object, direct and indirect taxes, with any type of punctuation. So I'm going to get rid of that colon and then use this. So the reading passage gives mainly an overview of the differences between direct and indirect taxes. The lecture, now don't forget to put in your be verb there. You're using passive voice. So the lecture is related to the reading passage by supporting, I would say, the idea of indirect taxes with a familiar example of cigarette trade. Probably here you're using cigarette as an adjective, so I'm going to get rid of your S. Okay, so far I've made a few, and I got to tell you, actually have a pretty good essay here. I've already scored it. I gave you a 3.0 out of 5, or 20 points out of 30 on this. I think you're going in the right direction with this. And this is a very difficult lecture. And I should tell you that this practice test is a lot more difficult than the actual TOEFL. So the reading passage, which is singular, the verb should be singular. The reading passage is focused on the last concept by mentioning, I'm not going to say what is the taxes, because you're using what's called a noun clause by mentioning what taxes are, and taxes is plural. And you might say here, how, use another connector. So you might say, what taxes are and how individual behavior I'm going to say something like how individuals react to taxes. Payment is usually enforced by the legislature. This quotation in here is a little bit unusual because you're not quoting the whole thing. But you could put the comma and say payment is usually enforced by the legislature as the writer. And I would use present tense here, Rafaat. When we're summarizing information, it's better to use the present tense. And even notice how in the beginning of your paragraph you said is focused, right? So let's keep things consistent. Really pay attention to your verbs. during the integrated writing practice test. It's a good idea to keep things in the present tense, simple present. In modern taxation system, taxes are levied in money. Maybe you can use a connector like this. Furthermore, you might say the situations of the economy in many countries can give an opportunity. I'm going to say for. Usually we have an opportunity for tax collection. I'm going to say whether, because you're using Canada, the USA, and the UK. Those are three things. So it's probably better here to say whether. For tax collection, whether it is performed by, get rid of that because let's make it plural. You're talking about three different agencies, three different governments, right? So we'll say whether is performed by government agencies such as Canada, USA, and the UK. Now here's, you're probably asking me a quick question, Michael. Why are you putting the in there but not with Canada? Usually when you have names of countries that refer to a collection of states, the United Kingdom, the United States of America, the Hawaiian Islands. However, when you have a country like Canada that refers to the one country, but not a whole collection of different things that make up the country, you don't need the article. So I'm going to say such as Canada, the USA, and the UK. Again, instead of using says, use present tense. The lecturer says, as in an example of indirect taxes, that cigarette taxes have many unintended and unanticipated negative effects. Very nice topic sentence. I love it. As consequences of these taxes, I'm going to put a comma here. Now, why is that? This idea here is called your introductory phrase. And usually introductory phrases, which like prepositional phrases or dependent clauses, when they're more than 2 or 3 words, it's usually very common in academic writing to set apart the phrase from the main part of the sentence with a comma. That's why I'm putting the comma there. So the lecturer says, as an example of indirect taxes, that cigarette taxes have many unintended and unanticipated negative effects. As consequences of these taxes, we face smuggling, theft, and channeling. The last point I'm going to say here, you really want to say the last point which is mentioned is. That's the grammar you're looking for. So the last point mentioned is. Believe it or not, I'm putting is after mention. Now why is that? Now this is something to think about. Again, I could have said the last point which is mentioned in the lecture is, but you're trying to be more concise, which I like. So the adjective clause which is mentioned has been reduced to what's called a past participle. Mentioned. That's more concise writing. So the verb, the main verb here is. The last point is rolling your own as a good example. we can find two consequences clearly. Wow, this could be, you're demonstrating some pretty sophisticated sentence structure in this particular sentence. So I think we have to do some work with it, but I think you're definitely going in the right direction with your colon there. So when you use a colon, it means that everything after that will be restating the idea of the two consequences. First, the low tax area, and then the high one. Yeah, I don't think that you want to use, I think it's probably better here to not use the colon, because notice how your second idea here is a totally separate sentence. It's a little bit unusual to try to use two separate sentences after a colon. That's typically not the way it works there. So you might take this idea, get rid of the colon, and maybe we can say something like, we might say, we can find two consequences clearly from the taxation of cigarettes. Then you might say, first, see, this is, I may have to change my score, to be honest with you, my score 3.0, because it's this. I know what you want to say, but grammatically you're not able to say it. But you're saying, first of all, smugglers you might say smugglers transport the cigarettes from a low tax area You say, first, smugglers transport the cigarettes from a low tax area to a high one. Then you might say something like, thereby I like your word exploit. I'm going to say giving them a chance to You might say something like, after you smuggle or sell the cigarettes, they are able, you might say, to make significant profit. Secondly, and I think theft, smuggling kind of relates to you might say there is also counterfeiting of these cigarettes themselves. So to sum up grammatically, the reading passage gives, I'm going to use the singular there, third person singular. The reading passage gives a general vision of taxes by direct and indirect ones, while the lecture supports, again, use the singular form here because lecture is singular, so the verb should be singular, while the lecture supports that by focusing of indirect taxes such as in cigarette taxes. Okay, so far, what I've done so far is I've made some editing suggestions. So let's look through it one more time. Let's even check our spelling. So legislature should be changed. You see how you have legista should be changed to legisla. So let's change that. Countries, again, you have it spelled counteries. It should be countriers. So let's change that. Tax. We'll fix that one in a minute. Okay, let's look at it one more time. In this set of materials, the reading passage gives mainly an overview of the taxes. Okay, so we've made the editing changes. Now I want to make just a few structural or content type changes. The one change I might make in the beginning is the reading passage gives mainly an overview of the differences between direct and indirect taxes. And then say, and use a compound sentence here, and the lecture is you might say, supports these ideas you might say by using taxes to show that they're unintended consequences. See, this is something that you mention here, right, I think is very good. In that third paragraph, you mention that idea. I think that you should also forecast that same point, Rafaat, in the introduction. So let's take a look at the intro again. In this set of materials, the reading passage gives mainly an overview of the differences between direct and indirect taxes, and the lecture supports these ideas by using the example of cigarette taxes to show that there are unintended consequences. The reading passage is focused on the last concept by mentioning what taxes are and how individuals react to taxes. Payment is usually enforced by the legislature. As the writer explains, in modern taxation systems, taxes are levied in money. That is correct. Your points are good. And I put the word furthermore in there just as a way of making your ideas connect a little bit better. Furthermore, the situations of the economy in many countries can give an opportunity for tax collection, whether it is performed by government agencies such as Canada, the USA, and the UK. I'm going to put a comma here too. We got items in a series here. We have A, which is Canada. We have B, which is the USA. And then we have the UK, which is C. So a lot of times in writing, we will put a comma after the first two items because we want to make sure that the reader knows, Rafaat, that the USA and the UK are different countries. And putting the comma there shows that separation. Maybe we'll say the example, because we've already mentioned it, I think, in the introduction, right? So the lecture says, as the example, maybe, as in the example of indirect taxes, that cigarette taxes have many unintended and unanticipated negative effects. As a consequence of these taxes, we face smuggling, theft, and channeling. This is where you probably have to work on it just a little bit more, because if you talk about smuggling and then theft and then channeling, it's a good idea to discuss, I think, all three of those ideas. And I think the idea, the last point mentioned, is rolling your own as a good example. That relates to channeling, right? So I don't think it belongs here. So I'm going to cut that and put this down here for right now. And let's go back. So what you've done here, which I like, you've explained the idea of smuggling, theft, and channeling. It's a good idea that you discuss those in the exact order that you mention them in this particular sentence. First, smugglers, and that relates to smuggling, right? I'm going to say some consequences as opposed to two, because I think there might be more than that. Okay, so we can find some consequences clearly from the taxation of cigarettes. Probably don't even have to say we there. You can simply say something like, the taxation of cigarettes has several consequences. Because using we, I mean, you're focusing on the content. Your purpose here is to not focus on your audience and you together. You want to focus more on summarizing the information. So maybe that's probably not even the best way to do that. I'm going to move it around a little bit. Now, I'm not even sure if you need that, because that interrupts what you're trying to do here. So I'm going to get rid of that whole idea. Okay. Because if you say first and then you say smugglers, then we see that you're now developing this idea here. If you say second and you refer to theft, we know you're developing that second idea. If you say third or finally channeling, we know you're mentioning all three of those ideas. So the first, smugglers transport the cigarettes from a low tax area to a high one, thereby giving them a chance to exploit the vast differences in the tax rates. After smugglers sell the cigarettes in the area of the high tax rate, they're able to make a significant profit. Secondly, there is counterfeiting of the cigarettes themselves. You might say a form of theft. I think that's important because then we can see, if you say second, there is also counterfeiting, a form of theft of the cigarettes by countries such as China. And I think it says according to, you might say, the lecture, China has made illegal counterfeits Marlboro cigarettes exact replicas of the actual brand. You might say so. That's something that it does say. Okay, so I think we need to make just one more small change. Okay, so let's see what we have so far. You say after the smugglers, you say secondly, there's also counterfeiting, a form of theft of the cigarettes by countries such as China. According to the lecture, China has made illegal counterfeits of Marlboro cigarettes, which are almost exact replicas of the actual brand. And then you get to, finally, some consumers begin to roll their own then you might say because it is a lot cheaper. Once it's referred to as channeling, I think you definitely want to mention that. referred to as channeling. And this is a way for people to save money. Okay, so I think we got it. So this is where we want to get rid of this. Probably don't need to say this at that point. Now what I did is what I was trying to do here, because you had this idea, there were three ideas, three main, I think, points in the lecture. Smuggling, theft, and channeling. What you need to do is to make sure that you explain or define those 3 points. That's what I did in the remainder of this paragraph, which I think was important. Then you say, to sum up, the reading passage gives a general vision of taxes by direct and indirect ones, while the lecture supports that by focusing on the unintended effects of indirect taxes, such as in cigarette taxes. I think we have it. Let's read it one more time. In this set of materials, the reading passage gives mainly an overview of the differences between direct and indirect taxes, and the lecture supports these ideas by using the example of cigarette taxes to show that there are unintended consequences. The reading passage is focused on the last concept by mentioning what taxes are and how individuals react to taxes. Payment is usually enforced by the legislature, as the writer explains. In modern taxation systems, taxes are levied in money. Furthermore, the situations of the economy in many countries can give an opportunity for tax collection, whether it is performed by government agencies such as Canada, the U.S.A. and the UK. The lecture says, as in the example of indirect taxes, that cigarette taxes have many unintended and unanticipated negative effects. As consequences of these taxes, we face smuggling, theft, and channeling. First, smugglers transport the cigarettes from a low tax area to a high one, thereby giving them a chance to exploit the vast differences in the tax rates. After the smugglers sell the cigarettes in the area of the high tax rate, they're able to make a significant profit. Secondly, there is also counterfeiting, a form of theft of the cigarettes by countries such as Canada. According to the lecture, China has made illegal counterfeits of Marlboro cigarettes, which are almost exact replicas of the actual brand. Finally, due to the high taxes imposed, some consumers will be able, I'm going to say get rid of will be, just say will roll their own cigarettes because it is a lot cheaper. Referred to as channeling, this type of behavior is yet another unintended consequence of taxation. To sum up, the reading passage gives a general vision of taxes by direct and indirect ones, while the lecture supports that by focusing on the unintended effects of indirect taxes, such as the cigarette tax. So how many words do we have here? You should be close to 300, a little bit too long. You should be, I'm going to say closer to 250. So maybe I went overboard a little bit in this paragraph here, but I did kind of give you some ideas. So I think right now you're probably, I gave you originally a score of 3.0 out of 5, or about 20 points out of 30, but you had that one sentence, you remember, that I pretty much had to rewrite the whole thing. So you had that one sentence in that one paragraph that was just totally, really different. It just wasn't well written at all, and I had to kind of straighten out all the grammar and the vocabulary there. So I think that one sentence is enough to bring you below 3, probably put you at about 2.75 out of 5, or 18 points out of 30. All right, anyway, thank you for completing the integrated practice test. I hope that through this video, you've gotten some good editing suggestions, also some good suggestions relating to the content and the organization of the essay. And keep up the good work.